Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. Today, we're diving into a pretty huge one, the 3-volume SAGE Handbook of Marxism. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but this is not a history book. Seriously. Think of it more like a modern toolkit, one that treats Marxism less like a dusty old ideology and more like a sharp, active method for understanding the world we're all living in, right here, right now. All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. First up, we'll get a feel for what this handbook actually is. Then, we'll explore how it completely reframes Marxism as an analytical lens. After that, we'll look at 3 key patterns this lens helps us see, use a single core metaphor to make it all click, and then wrap up by seeing what this whole new perspective helps us notice about the world.
So let's start with what this thing even is. The editors are really clear from the get-go that this is not about looking backward. They actually call it an in-depth cartography of modern Marxist thought. You know, like it's a detailed map, but for ideas, a map of how these concepts are being used and debated today.
And believe me, it is a massive map. We're talking over 80 chapters that touch on just about everything, from digital finance and technology to gender and post-colonial studies. The main point is that our social realities are always shifting, so these researchers are constantly having to, as they put it, revisit and renovate the classic concepts to keep them sharp and relevant.
And that really gets to the heart of it. The whole goal here is to move past old, rigid dogma. It's all about showing that these ideas aren't some kind of historical artifact. No, they're living, breathing tools for analysis that people are actively using right now.
And this brings us to what's probably the biggest, most important reframing in the whole handbook. It really pushes back against the common idea of Marxism as just a set of failed predictions about how capitalism was supposed to collapse. Instead, it asks us to think of Marxism as an analytical lens. So it's not a crystal ball for predicting the future. It's more like a microscope for looking at the present. It's not trying to tell you what to believe. It's offering a method to help you see the hidden structures that organize our everyday lives. Now, the official term for this method is historical materialism. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little academic, but the idea behind it is actually pretty straightforward. It just says that instead of starting with big ideas or culture, we should first look at the fundamental economic relationships in a society. The point isn't to predict what will happen, but to understand how our society is built from the ground up, and how that economic foundation creates the tensions and changes we see all around us. Okay, so if we put on these glasses, what do we actually see? Well, the handbook points to a few core patterns that help us understand the structure of the system. First, there's the idea that the specific way an economy is set up, how things are produced, how profit is extracted, that's what ultimately sets the terms for the relationship of rulers and ruled. It's like the hidden architecture that shapes our whole social world. Second, it looks at labor as way more than just a 9-to-5 job. In this view, our work is the fundamental human activity. It's what shapes our very being, our consciousness, our identity, even our relationship with nature and with each other. And third, it suggests that crises, things like recessions or financial meltdowns, aren't just accidents. They aren't external shocks that come out of nowhere. Instead, they're an inevitable built-in feature of how the system functions and even reproduces itself. In other words, crisis isn't a bug, it's a feature. Okay, I know those are some pretty abstract ideas. So to bring it all back down to earth, let's use one really powerful metaphor the book hints at. I want you to picture our day-to-day life, our politics, our jobs, our culture, as the visible city. The streets and the buildings we see every day. We navigate it, but we almost never think about the massive, complex web of pipes, electrical grids, and deep foundations underneath that make the whole thing possible. Well, this method, this analytical lens, is basically the map to that hidden terrain. It's a tool that reveals those underlying economic structures, the means of production, labor, surplus value, that invisibly shape the world we see and experience. It's designed to make that invisible infrastructure visible.
So what's the real payoff of using this map? Why does reframing Marxism as a lens actually matter for us today?
Well, by showing us these deep interconnections between the economy and our social lives, this method just completely dismantles the idea that the way things are now is somehow natural or permanent. It reminds us that our system was built, and once you really see how it's wired together, the whole belief that it has to be this way starts to look a lot less convincing. And that, right there, is the crucial takeaway. This approach gives us a language and a set of tools to analyze what the handbook calls capitalism's role as the religion of everyday life. It helps us take all those common sense ideas, the things we just assume are true, and turn them into objects of critical investigation. It makes the invisible visible.
Ultimately, this whole project, this entire handbook, is about equipping us to ask that one vital question about our own lives. For the full long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.